What is up, everybody? Good evening. Welcome to the Thursday edition here at Last Second Sports. We've got 49ers players that want to get paid. We got a guy who almost signed with the 49ers who said he didn't choose them because, well, we'll get into that. And we've got much more to cover. We're going to talk about those things plus more, and we're going to do it next. All right. Welcome back to Last Second Sports, where we are giving you our take down to the last second. It's Thursday night, as I said, which means I got my guy Marco Martinez in the building. What's up, Marco? How you doing?
What up, bro? I love how you always introduce me like my name a different style every time. Last time you did it like you were announcing for the UFC. This time you did it like you're trying to like make sure everyone knows that I'm Hispanic. Marco. I'm like, I just love it. I just love it. Every week there's something different. I love it.
Yeah, I like to spice it up a little bit. I gotta try out some different things. Once I eventually land on one that I like, then I'll figure it out and maybe be steady, but probably not. It'll be different every single week. Glad to see that you are here, that you're doing good. Man, things are getting a little crazy in 49er land, man. I'm not going to lie. There's some interesting things that have come out over the last couple of days. Remember during the draft, Marco, when we were like, hey, Jennings still hasn't signed his tender. And then there were a lot of people in the chat. They're like, yeah, he did. Go check the Instagram. And so we checked the Instagram and it was like year 4 loading. He has signed the tender is what we thought. The reality of the situation is he never signed the tender. So we've got Ayuk looking for a contract. We've got Jennings looking for a possible contract. And now we've got CMC not there for business reasons. Now, there could be multiple things going on with CMC. We haven't heard for sure he's looking for a new contract. We do know he's getting married in June, it sounds like. So maybe it has to do with that. But he does normally tend to show up to these things. And we know that he has just 2 years left on his deal. Nothing is guaranteed. He knows how important he is to this offense. Now maybe he might be possibly looking for a new deal. And that would be understandable, although we don't know for sure if that's the case. So, a couple questions for you. Do you think the 49ers should pay all 3 of these gentlemen and give them extra years if that is, in fact, what they're looking to do?
I mean, it becomes a tough situation for the Niners. Like the CMC situation, there's no guaranteed money, man. Like I understand, like we could say it's the wedding, like that's you know what, let's make it sound like that, like he has a good reason. Obviously, that is a good reason to get married and everything. But I don't think that's what it is, man. Like I think everything's already been situated. There are multi-millionaires where they paid everyone to set everything up. They pay to have it done already. There's no worries from here until that wedding day, besides if one of them get cold feet. So like everything else is like situated. So I don't think it's necessarily that. I think it's more so he wants money there. I know the White Sox hat is crazy. I know. It's my hat, dude. I can't stand Ryan, man. Why is he doing here? But
he's like Ice Cube in the like late 80s, early 90s. Oh, dude. Shut up. No way, dude. I had no idea I swear on everything. I had no idea you were wearing an Ice Cube shirt. That is crazy dumb luck. Wow. All right.
Yeah. You gotta go back old school, you know what I'm saying? No, but like it's hard because I know a lot of people always like, oh, F players, XYZ, trade them, right? When it's usually the African American player, when usually it's the black player. They're like, hey, trade him. Yeah. You don't want to be here, trade him. Ain't no one gonna say that when it's Christian McCaffrey, right?
Of course not.
Truthfully, they're not gonna say that. I wonder why, right? I personally don't think you should trade him. I don't think you should trade Brandon Ayuk. But it's very interesting when you get into that conversation on how valuable is Christian McCaffrey to the team. Is he more valuable than Deebo Samuel, George Kittle, Fred Warner, Nick Bosa? Like, you could argue he's one of the most important players on this roster. In order for Brock to succeed, CMC needs to be on the roster. And I think he has so much leverage with it being a situation where if the 49ers would have won the Super Bowl, I truly, truly believe they wouldn't be worried and they'd be paying everyone. The fact that they didn't win the Super Bowl, it's one of those ones where now they're planning for the future in a way. Hey, we need to realize our cap situation's coming up. We need to play our cards right because if we pay everyone, we're screwed. So I think it's more so don't pay everyone. Jennings is the odd man out. Let him play on that tender. If not, trade him. Like, truthfully, you just drafted first round rookie who should be playing a low key. My hair is curly a little bit.
He's got more of the baseball vibe, though. It's less of a Jerry curl, more of the baseball vibe. Yeah, we just need to get him like those thick visor glasses, and he'll be set.
You want me to pull him up? I actually have them.
God, why am I not surprised?
No, but like, it's hard, man. Like, I think if they would have won the Super Bowl, hands down, they're paying everyone. The fact that they didn't is like, whoa, all right, Christian McCaffrey's hitting that age for a running back, has had a lot of touches. What's the right money for running back at this age? So I think it's very hard to pay everyone. I mean, essentially, the main guys I'm paying is Christian McCaffrey and Ayuk. Let Debo walk next year. You cut him or trade him, whatever you got to do. George Kittle, potentially the same thing. Like, those are the guys those should be the odd man out if we're looking for how the Niners are orchestrating their offense.
Let's start with CMC and we'll work our way back. So CMC, like I said, 2 years left, nothing fully guaranteed. Essentially, the 49ers can, move on from him. But we don't know if this is for sure why he's not there. Presumably it does make sense, but let's just go the route. Let's say that he does want some more guarantees or he wants to get extended. What I would be willing to do if I were the 49ers is I don't want to add years on the back end of his deal. Hell, I don't even want to guarantee next year because I want the flexibility. But what the 49ers could do is, remember a few years ago, they reworked that deal with Mostert. Mostert was unhappy. They gave him like $6 million fully guaranteed that year. Now he only played the one game, but they made it like a 1-year deal and said, hey, we'll revisit this every single year until we don't see it working out. Unfortunately for him, that was the very next year and he went to Miami. What I would do is I would rework the deal for this year, give him more money up front, and then allow next year to stay as it is, and then figure it out year to year from that standpoint. Because you're right, Christian McCaffrey is 28 years old. A lot of times that's when you see the decline of running backs, especially a guy coming off of nearly 800 touches over the last 2 years. So for me, I don't want to lock in long term, and I want that flexibility. There is one thing that we can say is we don't know what Brock Purdy looks like without CMC. But they're eventually going to have to figure that out, and that time is coming sooner than later. So if you're going to put all your eggs in the Brock Purdy basket, you cannot continue to just pay everybody moving forward. Now, I think we all agree that Ayuk is eventually going to get a deal, although that one might get a little bit messy depending on what he's asking for. If he's asking for closer to 30 and the 49ers think he's worth closer to 25, I mean, that's pretty far apart. I could see that one maybe extending into training camp. We'll see how that goes. And then Jawan Jennings is the interesting one to me, Marco, because we spent a lot of time talking about Debo. We talked about Ayuk. And I remember talking during the draft, and the point that I was making was, what about Jennings? And at that point, I was talking about how he hadn't signed his tender. And then some people in the chat tried to correct us, and we went with it. We're like, yeah, I guess maybe he has based off the Instagram. But I always looked at Jawan Jennings as the guy that could be the odd man out this year. And if you do that, you would do it more towards training camp. You trade him for a future pick, get some of the assets back, especially if you ended up drafting a wide receiver. Well, the 49ers didn't draft just one wide receiver. They drafted 2 wide receivers, which to me, if a Danny Gray steps up or one of these other guys steps up on top of the rookies that you're certainly going to keep and not risk to the practice squad, then you have to imagine that Jennings all of a sudden becomes expendable. get something for him before he just walks freely next year. That's what I would look to do potentially. So if I'm looking at any of them, I would say I would give CMC more guaranteed money this year, but not extend that past this year. Obviously, I'm trying to work out a long-term deal with Ayuk, and then Jennings would be kind of my odd man out that I'd be willing to trade for like a fifth round pick just so I can recoup something for him before he walks next year.
And it's interesting because when we do talk about Jawan Jennings, he has a right to want more money than what he's tendered for, right?
For sure. Yeah.
He was arguably the MVP of the Super Bowl. If the Niners win the Super Bowl, he wins MVP.
Yeah.
And that's because he was actually given an opportunity in the Super Bowl. Like he hasn't really been given an opportunity in the past game or as a 49ers receiver to be that dude. So for me, like he has that right. Also, it sucks for him, man, because his rookie year he was cut, wasn't claimed by any other team. So it made him a restricted free agent because they ended up signing him to a 3-year deal. Didn't get that fourth year of accrued season. Um, Ends up having to be a restricted free agent where they tendered him, where he could have been an unrestricted free agent, could have gotten a reasonable contract after the Super Bowl. So he's kind of screwed in a situation. So I do feel bad for him, but I think he's the odd man out. You just drafted a first round receiver. That tells me you're okay with letting Jennings walk or trading him for whatever you can get for him. And I think you could probably get a fifth rounder for him, fourth or fifth rounder for him, because he's a really good receiver. He blocks, he does things the right way. So they probably should trade him. At the end of it, I think it's the contract that's going to get really really messy is that IU contract, and I think potentially the CMC one as well. What teams truly want to pay older running backs? Like we've learned in the past, no teams are really doing it. So if the Niners do want to get greedy, right? In terms of when I say greedy, I'm always pro player. So he just won offensive player of the year. He has leverage. He should have won MVP if we're being honest. So he has all the leverage on his side. Okay, don't play without me. Let's look at your running back room. You got Elijah Mitchell, who's often injured. You got Jordan Mason. You just drafted a running back. Is that why they drafted Isaac Garendo? Do they think he could replace CMC? Like, if I'm CMC, I'm willing to sit out all the way up until camp until I have a contract with guaranteed money. The biggest thing is I know a lot of people are always like, oh, he has a contract. He needs to play. Guaranteed money is the biggest thing. The Niners can do Christian McCaffrey wrong if they truly wanted. If Christian McCaffrey gets injured this year during camp, they could easily cut him after this year with no guaranteed money. And that's where it comes into play on why NFL players want guaranteed contracts. So for him, I understand it. Hold out, get your money. Rightfully, it's deserved. He needs to do what he needs to do for his family. I get it. There's people who are getting upset with him. It's ridiculous to get upset with players when they want to get their money, man. It truly is.
Yeah, I agree with that. Jesus says, let Jennings get paid. Do you see another team overpaying for Jennings? I don't. I mean, I think if he were to hit the open market, you're probably talking maybe like a 3-year, 18 million that could escalate up to 21 or 24 or something like that. I think that most teams understand what he is, which is a low end 2, high end wide receiver 3 option, depending on what scheme you're running and what have you. So he's definitely valuable, but I think certain teams would have to take him on to find that value. So I don't see him getting more than like 6 million a year is kind of what I would see him getting on the open market, but I could be wrong.
But then how much of that 16 million is fully guaranteed for him, right? Like that's the more important number
Yeah.
because he only has 4.8 this year that's fully guaranteed. Once he signs that tender. And if he doesn't and he goes and plays and gets injured and he's out for the year next year, he's screwed. So he would rather,
Oh,
you know
of
what? I'd
course.
rather you trade me sign a contract extension with another team, get 10 million fully guaranteed on a 3-year deal, and that's a super big win for him in terms of long-term money. So I get why he hasn't signed that tender, why he's not there. The biggest thing is this affecting the 49ers offensively going into OTAs and going to head into camp? You don't have your star running back. You don't have your receiver 3 and your receiver 1. Does this affect the 49ers where heading into OTAs, training camp, the regular season, do we see the timing off? Do we see the players get injured because they haven't been going through that long stretch of period where they're reamping their body? And is this an excuse for the Niners on why they don't get back to the Super Bowl?
Well, that was kind of the next question with this. I mean, do you feel like, last year when you looked at the San Francisco 49ers, they were hungry, extremely hungry. And that's what I labeled the stream. I said 49ers, have they lost their hunger? And the question becomes, obviously, I don't think they've lost their hunger. Like in general, they want to win, they want to do their best. But when you look at what the dedication was last year at this time of year versus what the dedication seems to be this time of year, for one reason or another, whether players are hurt, whether players are in contract disputes, whether players are just tired from making yet another long run and coming up short, there's a lot of big time players that are not available to them at this time of year. And yes, people say, hey, it's just voluntary and it's, but it's practice. This is the time of year where they start to put in early installs and you start to work on those things. Grant was talking about how he started seeing them use that cheat motion a lot in practice. Well, that would be something new for the 49ers. That's an install. That's something they're trying to work on for the defense. If they're going to give you simulated pressures, those are things that you work on early now. So that way, when you come back for mandatories, everybody's on the same page. You're really starting to install it. So it's not like these practices don't mean anything. They certainly mean something. They have them for a reason. The team is choosing to go through these practices for a reason. It's because they're trying to install things. So people act as if these just mean nothing and it's not going to have any impact. Well, maybe not. But what I do know is these players were present last year and they were eager. They felt like this early preparation meant a lot last year for a team that was trying to win a Super Bowl. So why just a year later does it all of a sudden mean nothing? Well, it means nothing because it's our favorite team and we don't want to talk about any possible chinks in the armor. We'd be like, no, it doesn't mean anything because these players aren't here. But last year we were ecstatic that they were here. So do you feel like, hey, there seems to be more of a me versus a we attitude, and a lot of that could be stemming potentially from a lot of players on a 1-year deal. What are your thoughts?
It has to be a me before we. Has to be. It's
Mhm.
NFL, right? NFL, every NFL organization is me before we, right? So essentially, this is the business aspect of the NFL. Where hey, you know what? Once my contract's done, it's we, right? So I understand that it should be me before me, right? We right now, and I think it is, right? We're seeing Brandon Ayuk, Christian McCaffrey, some of the more unselfish players who don't complain and don't go to the press and say, "I want the ball more. I need this. We need to do this X Y Z." Like they don't do that. They're not selfish players. But when it comes to your contract, everyone is selfish. I don't care what anyone says. Like I'm not going to pocket watch and say, "Hey, Christian, you need to show up because you have a contract for the next 2 years. You need to play under that contract." Nah, because I understand if the Niners really wanted to get rid of Christian McCaffrey on the low, they could do it without any dead cap, really, because I believe it's 2 years over the next couple of years, 4 years, which is only 8 million.
Mhm.
So I think that's it. Brandon Ayuk, ain't no player showing up. They don't got guaranteed money after the next year. So I get it. Now, for me, I think it goes beyond is it me before we, right? Did they lose trust in Kyle Shanahan? That's my bigger question is do these players, we've seen a lot of players on the roster not participating. We've seen a lot of guys not show up. We've seen a lot of guys who are requesting more money. Is this, you know what? We're not going to win a Super Bowl with this roster under Kyle Shanahan over the next couple of years, or is it maybe a Brock situation? They don't believe in Brock X Y. I don't know what it is. Right? There's something bigger because if you truly believe in everything and you believe that you were a Super Bowl caliber team and you were guaranteed to get back to that spot and win a Super Bowl, you're showing up because you know how close you were. I think it's bigger than the me over the we aspect.
Well, we're going to talk about a team that did show up in full in just a second. They have major 49er vibes from last year. But Frank Tom Ocean says, What's up, crew? Sorry for missing the live streams. I know I'll miss you a little bit, Frank Tom Ocean, but glad to see you're here. Member for 14 months. Thank you. And Brother Bob, he's back from vacation. Member for 12 months. Appreciate you. Says yes, but that's 16 million guaranteed this year, though. He must be talking about CMC. I mean, he's 16 on the books.
I don't think
but
it's I don't think it's
a lot of
guaranteed.
that's already, yeah, a lot of that's already been paid to him. Like this is a lot of it. You got to remember, like what's on the books. A lot of that is signing bonus that's been kicked forward from previous years. So that's what the 49ers are on the hook for as far as writing into their books. That's not necessarily what's going to CMC. And those two things are very, very different.
The way I look at it is if you're cut, right? If he's cut post June 1st, which is usually how teams want to cut players,
Mhm.
he's guaranteed 2 million this year, 2 million next year, and 2026 and 2027 because of a void year that he helped the Niners out with. So
Mm.
technically he has 8 million that's guaranteed, and of that 8 million that's guaranteed, he has nothing truly past this season, and that's where it's more important. Where if you have no money after this season, if you get hurt, no team's gonna want to pay you a mega contract. And I think that's what people don't realize is like it's not about what you have guaranteed this year. Players always want guaranteed money for the following year because if they don't and they get injured, they are not getting a contract. And I think that's what's more important for players in the NFL. It's not an MLB or an NBA contract. The moment you sign pen and paper, you're guaranteed that entire contract.
Yeah, and I mean I understand where you're coming from, Mitchell and Ness, but at the same time, like this if we're gonna hold players to every little contract they sign, then why do we not hold teams to the same thing?
The Niners just
Right?
did it
Like
to Armstead.
yeah, teams have outs. Yeah, exactly. The Niners literally just did it to Armstead. Now it worked out for Armstead because he went somewhere else and got paid, but this happens every year. Teams do this every single year. So players have got to look out for themselves. They're basically subcontractors. Teams look out for themselves, and I understand both sides of it. But I mean, if we're going to use, hey, a player signed the deal, they know what it is, honor your deal. Well, teams don't honor the deal. So why are players like beholden to honor these crazy deals? I don't know. I don't know. I mean, at some point, like these deals become expired. What what you're worth today in 3 4 years could be completely different depending on the market of the league. You know, if the league starts bringing in more money and you're a big part of that, really, you know what I would do. This is this is how you can kind of turn the league upside down. And I don't know that anybody could actually pull this off, Marco. But you know how the big thing is like getting the fully guaranteed money. And Kirk Cousins was the first one. And then Deshaun Watson came in and everybody was pissed off. You know what the next power move is from a big time player, especially a big time quarterback? Ask for a percentage of whatever the value is for that season. So instead of signing a contract that says, hey, I want 50 million average annual value, and knowing that in 3 years that team's getting a bargain, you say, hey, I want 15% of the salary cap. So if that money goes up by 50 million, I know that I'm making X amount. I'm making a percentage based off the salary cap. So regardless of what it goes up, my money escalates with that. And that's what I'm getting. And then what that allows you to do as a team is it allows you to know exactly what that percentage is, and you can allocate 85% to the rest of the team. But I want a percentage of whatever the salary cap is. Now maybe I'm betting and maybe we have a COVID year and it goes down or whatever and I've screwed myself, but if it goes up, I want a percentage. That's the next power move from a player.
And that would be crazy. And I don't know if it's possible. I know Otani interpreters talked about was it smart for the CBA, right? Like it's all about CBA, the contract they have. I don't know if it's possible with the CBA contract that
Yeah,
they
maybe
just
not.
re-signed because they now can't like so if you for example if BA sits out on his 5th-year option where he's holding in or whatever, he can't hold out no more. He has to hold in because if they fine him, they can't take those fines back. XY, like a lot of things they did. I thought
Yeah.
redoing the CBA during the COVID year was stupid by the NFLPA because you're doing it in a year where everything is flipped upside down and the NFL was going to win that negotiation no matter what. They should have waited. They didn't. It's just interesting, man. I definitely think the way contracts are, I think they just need to go to guaranteed contracts. Like you make decisions and now instead of giving these players a 4-year, $18 million contract, you're going to see a 2-year, $12 million contract, fully guaranteed. The players would probably rather have that than a 4-year, $18 million contract where only 8 to 10 of it's guaranteed. Like, so essentially, like they got to do something about it, because the teams are winning when it comes to contracts, man, no matter what.
Yeah, no, of course. And you're right. I mean, maybe that's not a possibility, but I just feel like that would be like the next, if it is possible, that'd be the next power move. It's like I want a percentage of whatever the salary cap is.
All right, we're pushing for Brock Purdy to do that. So, I mean, hopefully he
There
could
we go.
change the
Brock
game.
Purdy's making the power move. Dave says, "What's up, Jesse?" And Baby Cube. Just kidding, Marco. But the look is there. I've been here. Just want to throw my 20 in the ring. Love the chat. Love your guys' passion and intelligence. Keep it up. How long can we keep the show going? Well, Dave, I don't know. We'll see. I think we got a good hour in us for sure. We'll see how it goes beyond that. Thank you so much for your contribution as always. Corey says, love the content. Jesse is a Seahawks fan. You're the realest Niner fan I know. Now that Mike McDonald is at the helm, I think the Hawks will be a way better team. Byron Murphy will be defensive rookie of the year.
Let's
Yeah,
talk about the
defensive
Hawks real
rookie.
quick.
Yeah, this is great. I'm actually glad that you brought it up because we had this as like a floating topic last week, and then because the show went so long, we just kind of cut it, and then we actually said we were going to bring it back this week, and we didn't, but we can now. This makes a lot of sense to talk about it. So let's talk a little bit about the Seattle Seahawks. What do you think about what he's saying here? Do you feel like the 49ers or the Seahawks rather are going to be more competitive because Mike McDonald is at the helm?
Yeah, I think when you look at them, right, the biggest thing that I look at is not only did they get a really good defense coordinator who knows how to game plan against the 49ers offense, right? He had a really good game plan with the Ravens. And I think a lot of teams kind of emulated that game plan, especially in the playoffs. A lot of teams are trying to go split coverages, cover 6, cover 4, going a little bit more man coverage, blitzing a lot more. He has the secondary to do it. He has the defensive line to do it. Now, for me, their offense. It's more so their offense. I think their defense could compete with the Niners offensively, game plan wise and player wise. I think they have a good defense. Now, offensively, Ryan Grubb was a huge hire for Geno Smith because Ryan Grubb makes things easy on every quarterback he's been with at the college level. So now that he has a bunch of receivers, DK Metcalf, Tyler Lockett, Smith Najigba, he's gonna open things up. They have 2 good running backs. So it's gonna be very interesting to see how the Rams compete. It sucks that the Niners play the Rams early in the season because let's say McDonald has a similar game plan, right, that he had with the Ravens. If they come out and they do stuff and it makes the 49ers offense struggle, he may be giving the NFL a recipe to slow down Brock Purdy and the Kyle Shanahan's offense with Brock Purdy. So it is a concern. They are a threat because he had a great game plan. They have a better roster than people think. I think the only thing that's holding them back, I think, is Geno Smith against the Niners. But with Ryan Grubb at the helm as offensive coordinator, he's a much better offensive coordinator than they've had in the past. They should be better offensively. They're going to run the ball. They're going to have more open window throws. It's going to be a very, very interesting matchup. I believe we play week 5 or 6. Very interesting matchup for the Niners and Seattle Seahawks.
Yeah, I'll say this. A lot of people give me crap because I did think that Seattle had the perfect team to kind of match up with the 49ers defensively last year. And I was wrong about that, but not because of what you would think. I don't think I was wrong because the roster wasn't in place. I think I was wrong because the coaching staff just wasn't as good as what I had thought. I was shocked to see, and I do the behind enemy lines every week. The Seattle Seahawks creator, he and I have been working together for a couple of years, and he noticed the same exact things that I did, just how vanilla their both offense and defense were. It's like on offense, they wouldn't run any motion. It's like they would just line up and go. On defense, they would show you exactly what they were going to be in pre-snap, and they wouldn't roll coverage post-snap. It was like the most basic 1960s defense and offense that you can have. Teams knew exactly what they were getting. So it's like, I don't care how talented the roster is or isn't. You're at a major disadvantage when teams know exactly what you're doing. Where you look at a team like Minnesota, for example, from a talent aspect on defense, they had a fraction of the talent that the Seahawks had. However, they gave the 49ers fits because they disguised their defensive coverages. Brian Flores over there drawing up plays like a wizard. And even though the talent was far less, they were able to give the 49ers problems because they were confusing the 49ers and Brock Purdy a little bit. And so that's exactly what McDonald brings. They have the talent over there on defense, and they went more defense this draft. They drafted 2 more corners. They brought in Rayshawn Jenkins. They drafted arguably the best defensive player in the whole draft. So, yeah, I do think that Seattle, from a roster standpoint, last year had the team that could make things interesting with the 49ers just in the head-to-head matchup. I'm not necessarily saying for the division, but head-to-head matchup, I thought they had the perfect secondary to really kind of give the 49ers problems. What I didn't account for was how poor the coaching staff is. That's not going to be the case this year. And I think that McDonald knows exactly what he's doing. I think that he certainly could draw some things up to confuse the 49ers and really make this interesting. So I don't look at Seattle as like some major pushover. Also, you look at Seattle and some of the injuries they had last year. They were missing both their tackles for a big portion of that season. Both those tackles are very talented in their second year. Presumably, you would imagine they would be healthy this year. But what happened through some of those injuries is their offensive line is now very deep. I mean, they have 2 swing tackles that are waiting there that are pretty talented guys, and Fant and Forsyth. So they have some guys there now. The interior of the offensive line, they've kind of rebuilt on the fly. They got arguably the best guard in this whole draft. He's going to start at right guard right away. So they're building through the trenches. I find what Seattle's doing very intriguing, very interesting. And the NFC West is coming. You know what my big concern is right now, Marco, is looking at the 49ers the last couple of years. They really have neglected to build through the draft or build the trenches through the draft the last 2 years. And I think that they're going to see that kind of crumble and hit them in the face in another year or two when you're watching the rest of the NFC West, especially the Rams and the Seahawks. And outside of the NFC West, you can look at the Detroit Lions, for example. These teams are going heavy in the trenches. And I think in 2 or 3 years, that really might end up coming back to bite the 49ers. And instead of them being super competitive and still fighting for the division, they might have to take a year down or 2 down to kind of rebuild the trenches on the fly and do maybe something like the Steelers did this year where they go offensive line, offensive line, offensive line. Okay, we got it fixed. So I don't know. We'll see how it plays out long term, but I do think Seattle with McDonald and Grubb at the helm, they're much better coached, and I expect them to give the 49ers all they can handle this year. And maybe the 49ers win both those games, but I think Seattle's a lot tougher than what people are giving them credit for. Just go up and down that roster. There's a lot of talent on that roster. There really is.
Interesting that you said that last year because I thought the same thing. I thought the Seattle Seahawks were going to give us a good run, not necessarily for the division, but on our matchups. And I thought the Niners would win the division. But it's any roster you could give the best roster to a team. For example, do you remember when Philly loaded that stacked roster with Nnamdi Asomugha and all those dudes? That team was stacked, man, and it was coaching. It was coaching and egos, right? And I think that was the biggest thing and why Seattle wasn't successful. The ego of Pete Carroll, the ego of their offensive coordinator who hasn't been good since he's been with Seattle. So it's definitely going to be interesting to watch them compete with the Niners. I definitely think they're going to be more competitive with us because of the schematic wise and disguising things. So I think that was a great question. So shout out to him, man. A great question. I know we were planning on talking about it, but we forgot about it.
Yeah, definitely. That was a great question. Alan says, Jess, if the Niners don't make the playoffs, do you see Kyle being on the hot seat? Yeah, absolutely. I don't know how you can have arguably the best roster in the NFL and just not make the playoffs. Like, I don't see that happening, but yes, you would have to put him on the hot seat, I think.
I disagree.
Okay.
How do they miss the playoffs? Does Brock Purdy go down for the year? Certain situations, I'm like, there's certain things that can cause them to miss the playoffs where it's kind of out of Kyle's control.
Well, listen, if Brock Purdy goes down for the year, now all of a sudden you really don't know who your quarterback of the future is
No,
because
yeah,
you saw him
absolutely.
get hurt in an NFC Championship game, and then he goes down for a year. I mean, yeah, that could certainly be a reason why they missed the playoffs. So they couldn't go without him and rely on the Pastronaut or something like that. At that point, you'd go sign Ryan Tannehill if he's available, honestly, and try to see if you can make it work. But
Or you just trade for Sam Darnold. Either way.
yeah, Sam Darnold. But yeah, I mean, if that were to happen, certainly maybe you can't put that on Kyle, but now your future's in even more flux because you really don't know who the quarterback of the future is.
Yeah,
That'd
so
be like
that's
the
for
worst
me.
case scenario.
So for me, that's the only thing. Like I wouldn't. It has to be how do they miss the playoffs, right? For me, like, are they fully healthy and they just missed the playoffs by getting outplayed and stuff like that? So that just for me, that would be my answer. But if they miss the playoffs, everyone's healthy, he probably gets fired. Like if we're being honest, he probably should get fired.
Yeah. Yeah. It depends on what you're looking up. I think over the cap is a little bit easier to navigate, but I like what is it, Spotrack or Spot Rack, however you want to say it. I like that one for historical data. So it depends on what you're kind of looking up. But we talked a little bit about the 49ers and is the hunger still there? And we talked about last year and how everybody showed up to these OTAs that are not mandatory. Well, you've got the Packers doing something similar to what the 49ers did last year. You had a player come out for them and say that they feel like they let the 49ers off the hook and that they are trying to win a Super Bowl. And that's why everybody's showing up and they're hungry. I think a lot of people got really hung up on what he said and not the premise of what the team is trying to do. Everybody's like, "Oh, what do you mean you let him off the hook?" I mean, did did you let us off the hook when Love threw the pick when he didn't have to throw the pick or when you dropped the intercept? Like whatever. Everybody got caught up in what he said, and it's like, no, no, no. Who cares what he said? What is it that they're using for motivation? The point is that they've got everybody there, and they're taking an approach that is very similar to what the 49ers took last year, and it worked out very well for the San Francisco 49ers. Certainly, you would have loved to have won a Super Bowl, but they made it to a Super Bowl. All that hard work they put in during this time last year led them to getting to a Super Bowl. We'll see what it does for the Packers, but to hear that team say, hey, we feel like we can win, that's why everybody's here day one. They clearly look at OTAs much like the 49ers did last year and realize, hey, maybe these things are important, even if they're not mandatory. We want everybody to be there and be on the same page. This is a team that's hungry. What do you think about, first of all, what was said, whether you agree with it or not, but the overall display that the Green Bay Packers are showing by using the San Francisco 49ers loss as major motivation?
I love what he said. Like as a player
Mhm.
perspective, I love what he said. You did let the Niners off the hook. You were up 7,
Mhm.
21-14. You missed a field goal, which would have been 24 17. So it's a lot of things played factor, right? Like, so it's not just like
Couple
the
dropped
Niners,
picks.
yeah, dropped interceptions, and that's a defensive player talking about it, right? He
Mhm.
knows his defense let the Niners off the hook by dropping those interceptions, not doing enough for their offense, who was playing against one of the best defenses in the league with a young roster. So I love the mentality from a young player like that, where he's like, you know what? I'm going to take that leadership role. I've been here a couple of years. I'm going to be that leader. Everyone
And
needs to
he's an
show up.
all-pro, two-time all-pro,
So
you know?
I like the mentality because when the Niners did it that one year, was it last year? Everyone was excited, right? CMC was there, everyone was there showing up, and they had a goal and they had a purpose for being there at the OTAs. They were setting a mentality, setting the tone for their season. So I get what the Packers are saying in terms of everyone needs to show up. We need to get our minds right. They honestly, Jesse, they let the Niners off the hook. And I get what he's saying. Because if you and it wasn't just 2 interceptions. It wasn't just 2. It was 2 drop pick sixes. That's what it was.
Mm.
It wasn't just interceptions. And so when you look at it, they could have put the Niners away early with those drop pick sixes. They missed a field goal. Their defense, and I think this is his mentality as well. The defense gave up a touchdown late in the game on a long 12 play drive. Um, and I felt like that's kind of something he's saying. Like, we let them off the hook. We could have ended their season by getting a stop there. Truthfully, I don't mind him saying that. And the Niners because check this out, Jesse. Don't the Niners talk all this smack too? Don't the Niners always tell every other team on social media what happened with the Niners when the Niners played the Philly, right? After we lost to Philly. If we had Brock, if we had this, every year the Niners have lost, it's we let them off the hook. If we had this player, if this would have happened, XYZ, we let them off the hook. I don't see no difference. Truthfully, I don't. So for me, looking at it, I'm not gonna bash on a player because he's on another team saying it. Because when the Niners say it, I don't bash him. I'm not gonna have this mentality where I'm gonna let the Niners do it, but then when another team says it, it's wrong. Like, that's not the conversation that I'm gonna have when it comes to sports, because truthfully, we see a lot of Niner players doing it, man. And it's just weird to me for me to say just because he's a Packer, him saying this is not okay.
Yeah, I mean, I have no issue with what he said. I find it interesting that, there's always certainly double standards from a fan base, and I understand all that. I just, like I said, I felt like everybody was reading into what he said and not the impact of what he was really trying to say, which is really last year's over. It doesn't matter what happened in that game, why a team won or why a team lost. It's all irrelevant at this point. We're all on to this year. I just found it interesting that a young team does feel like they're on the level of the San Francisco 49ers, right? It's clear to me that nobody's scared of San Francisco. Nobody looks at the 49ers. I know that NFL.com ranked them as the number one roster yet again, but nobody looks at the 49ers like, "Oh my gosh, the task is too daunting." No, these teams are coming, man. They're ready. They're confident. And I think being able to play with the 49ers a year before you should have really even been in that position gives them that confidence. Now, we'll see how it plays out. I mean, they got to play the 49ers in the regular season, and maybe the 49ers go in and like, "Hey, that was cute, but we're going to put you in your place in your home stadium, and we'll see you in the playoffs. If you make it that far, we'll be there waiting." That's a possibility. But there's also the possibility that maybe the Packers win that game and they gain even more swagger. And now they're even more confident when they play the 49ers, regardless of where that game is, knowing that they played them close last year, knowing that they beat them this year. So these teams are coming. They're not afraid of the San Francisco 49ers. And I feel like that swag or that aura is starting to rub off of the 49ers a little bit. And I'll parlay it into another topic and why I think that. And I didn't tell you about this topic, but I saw it like right before we went live. I was reading this. So the 49ers were really interested in Rayshon Jenkins, who was a safety for the Jaguars last year, very good player. And the Seattle Seahawks were also in on him. There was two more teams that were in on him. Rayshon Jenkins chose Seattle over San Francisco, and he confirmed that in this article that San Francisco had actually given him the same exact offer. You had who was the linebacker that we thought had signed with the 49ers and then he went to Dallas? Kendricks. So that's two players right there that we know for sure were offered by the 49ers that chose to go somewhere else. And that tells me that maybe the rub of the 49ers is starting to lose its luster a little bit around the league.
Are you going to say the quote that Rayshon Jenkins said, though?
Yeah, he talked, but exactly. And this is important, though, because this tells me that the winning or the perceived winning isn't as high as what it was in the past. He said basically he wanted to go to a winning team. That's why he went to that's why he was visiting with the teams he was visiting with. Ultimately, he chose Seattle over San Francisco, even though the deal was exactly the same because of taxes. And that was his main reason. But again, if winning is your ultimate goal, if the 49ers are perceived to be this juggernaut of a team that I think a lot of fans think that they are or want them to be, then these players aren't choosing Seattle. They're over taxes. They're choosing the 49ers because they know that they can win this year. I just think that this is the first time in a while, and it doesn't mean they're not going to win a Super Bowl. It doesn't mean they can't win a Super Bowl. It doesn't mean they're not loaded still, because they are, or that they're not a good team. All those things remain true. But this perception that we have that the 49ers are the juggernaut and, teams should be afraid of them, that is clearly by the way that Green Bay is talking, by the way that free agents decided to go elsewhere, even though they had the same offer from San Francisco. That tells me that the luster of the 49ers is starting to wear a little bit thin across the league, and people don't view the 49ers as this just juggernaut that is going to run through the NFL anymore. They don't look at the 49ers like that.
And when you look at it, so the quote when I had read the article, because I had saw that, and he had said I wanted to go to a contender, a bigger market. Like that to me, I'm like, wait, whoa, a contender? Like, yo, you think Seattle's gonna contend with the Niners this year? And I think it's a mentality that these NFL players are seeing across the league, that the Niners have this. It's a lot of rah, right? It's a lot of talk, but they haven't finished. There's a lot of talk for not winning a Super Bowl, right? Like, and I think that's what these players see and they understand. Like, hey, you know what? They do a lot of talking, but they haven't won a Super Bowl yet. So I mean, if I go to another team that's close, I could be that team I could be that player that helps knock off the Niners. For example, the reason why the Packers are having this energy and having this kind of mentality, the Packers got a lot better this year in the offseason. Xavier McKinney at safety is a lot better. Did the Niners get better? And these players see this. Did they get better or did they stay the same? And we heard Kyle Shanahan say, we tried not to get worse. And I think that is a big statement when he said, it's like, whoa, you tried not to get worse. You should be trying to get better because you were so close. If you get better, you probably win the Super Bowl. So I think a lot of players across the NFL understand that it's truly closer with the 49ers in the NFC than the fans truly want to express.
Yeah, listen, I'm not saying that money didn't play any factor, but he specifically says the teams that he was looking at were contenders in bigger markets. So something bigger than Jacksonville, which obviously the 49ers are bigger than a Jacksonville Jaguars team. They fit that bill. And a contender. Well, he looks at Seattle obviously as a contender in the same division as the 49ers, right? So if he was afraid that the 49ers were so good, then he wouldn't choose a team like Seattle that's in the same division when he had an offer from the San Francisco 49ers. So, yes, of course, money always plays a factor. But players that truly want to win and talk that way and say, hey, contender is what I'm looking for. The money has to add up, but I am looking for a contender. They're not going to quibble over a few $1,000,000 in taxes. They're going to choose the team that they think they can win with. If he felt truly that the 49ers were this team, this juggernaut that can't be stopped, I don't think he would have chose Seattle over a tax situation. That's all I'm saying, based off of what he said and wanting to play for a contender. I'm just taking him at his word. So I don't know.
Hey, it's interesting for sure.
Yeah. All right. We got a few supers. Dave says trade Kyle. Okay. Brother Bob says, Dave, trade Kyle Levy for a Super Bowl trophy. I'm definitely down. Yeah. I mean, if you could guarantee a Super Bowl, that would be great. And Dave says, yeah, Brother Bob, is that possible at all? Oh man. Dave says, Marco, right again. Niners aren't as into it now. And then he says, if players choose other teams, doesn't that ultimately mean they don't trust and respect Kyle? Niners are not going to the Super Bowl this year unless something severe happens, and I'm a diehard Niner fan. Yeah, it's going to be tough, man. The league has just gotten better. It has. And then Dazza says, I think as fans, we are underestimating the psychological effect that losing a Super Bowl in that way will have on our players. Yeah, where I think it would show up, Daza, and we're not going to truly know, and maybe we don't find out because they just hit a hot streak and they don't lose early on. But if they have that 2-2 start or that 3-2 start or heaven forbid one like they had a few years ago where it's 3-5 or 4-5, I'm curious to see what happens to the team in those situations. And we may not find out. They might just come out and steamroll everybody, and that would be awesome. But if they get in that situation, what does that look like? That's what I truly want to know. So
Can you do me a favor real quick, Jesse? Can you pull up I hope I say his name right, DeAndre Berry's comment regarding Jordan Love's contract and him not playing this year? Because so he says it's a little ways up, but so DeAndre Berry says Jordan Love just said today he's thinking about sitting 2024 season out because the Packers won't give him more money. Nobody got shit altogether. I'm tired of hearing BS. Nobody got it locked. Actually, Jordan Love said he's not going to talk about his contract stuff. He's there at OTAs. He said that's not his worry. So the fact that he's there at OTAs says a different story, because that means contract talks are happening the right way. So he's going to play. I don't know where you're getting. He's going to sit out. They're going to end up paying him. He's at OTAs. Now, if he wasn't at OTAs, that'd be a very, very bigger conversation to have with the Packers. But since he's there, I don't know why that's a conversation. And even the article that I read, it's overblown because he's there at OTAs. And he even said, I don't want to talk about it. I'm here at OTAs. I'm doing what I'm supposed to do. Everything else is going to handle itself. So,
yeah, here's the exact quote. I mean, dang, you guys are like, weren't you the same dude that was in here like, Grant's tripping, y'all on some clickbait stuff? And then you're like, talking about clickbait. Literally, this was the quote. I don't really know what's going on, but we'll see. I'm not really going to get into much contract stuff. We'll see. I don't know yet. We'll see. That was it. That wasn't, I'm not going to play. I'm not going to show up. They better pay me. I'm not going to be showing up to Bro, he's there on the team mission to show up. Nobody's saying they got it on lock. I'm definitely not saying that. In fact, I said the contrary. I said they got to see the 49ers. We'll see how it goes. It may not mean anything, but what they are finding is they're finding a commonality and saying, hey, we want all of our big time players there for these voluntary training camps and practices because we're trying to chase something special. And that includes the leader, Jordan Love, who is seeking a new contract, to where you look at Miami and their quarterback who's seeking a contract. He's not there, right? Because he's trying to get paid too. So there's different ways that you can handle this. Jordan Love certainly knows that he's in line for a big payday. I'm sure that they're going to try to work on that, but he's also showing up to non-mandatory. So that in itself says the exact opposite of what you're saying, where he said he was going to sit out. So if you want to find that quote and you want to share that with me and prove it wrong, that's fine. But quick Google search, I've pulled up 3 articles and not one of them says anything close to that. So
he actually talked about, and it's interesting because he talked about being a leader from the article I read, at least, talked about being a leader and what it means to actually be there and have everyone else there to build the chemistry and to be that team that they want to be starting at OTA. So I don't know where you got that from, but I just wanted to bring that up because that just, for me, that is a false statement, because from what I read and everything that Jordan Love is saying, that's throwing words in his mouth. And I wouldn't want that to happen with a guy like BA or something like that, where words are being put in their mouths and stuff like that, like the trade rumors. He never requested a trade. So like, I like to clear stuff up because I don't want players to be looking like they're the bad guy.
And he says, do people even know what OTs are? They're literally meaningless unless you're a rookie. Okay, if they're meaningless, then why did the 49ers take the same approach last year where they wanted everybody to be there and they were on a mission? Like, this is the first chance to start to install new things. This is the first chance to get to know your new teammates. This is the first chance to go with your new defensive coordinator and figure out your new scheme and things that you're going to install. This is your first chance. I'm hearing the 49ers are practicing the fake motion, or the cheat motion, as Shanahan calls it, which is something that would be new for them to install. So this is your first layer of installs. Now, it's not the end of the world. Nobody's saying you're not going to win a Super Bowl by not being there, or that if you have a team that has everybody show up, that they are going to win a Super Bowl. But if it meant nothing, then guys like Patrick Mahomes wouldn't be showing up. Teams like the 49ers last year wouldn't be talking about, hey, we're on a mission. We know this thing's not mandatory, but we all want to be there. We want to get on this early. it does mean something. It clearly doesn't mean nothing, or nobody good across the league would show up. So, or the 49ers, by the way, this is how you know it means something. The 49ers asked Bosa to please show up and kind of be a leader. Bosa confirmed that. Hey, they asked me to be here. They asked me to show up. So that's why I'm here. Normally, I'd be working out by myself in Florida. Well, the 49ers clearly realize that it means something if they're asking a big time leader of their team to be there, knowing that other guys were going to be out. So I don't know how you can say it means nothing. I'm not saying it means the world, but it certainly means something, clearly, or they wouldn't have them.
It's always different though when it's, oh, come on, I'm at that heck of confetti to pick up. So I live right next to a high school, so they're doing a graduation, and someone did those confetti poppers, and it's flying all into my yard. Oh, that's all bad. But like it's different when it's another team though, Jesse. Like it's the Niners, so when the Niners do it, it's important. So that's all that matters.
Yeah, I mean that's the vibe I get. Dave says players aren't all in this year like last year, and he says nothing is meaningless in football. Plans to win. Yeah, I can't see where you can say it's just meaningless, because like I said, the 49ers last year wouldn't have showed up and wouldn't have talked about how important it was to start early. So it clearly means something. Last topic, 49ers, NFL.com. They did a rankings of the most complete teams in the NFL. They had the 49ers number 1. I'll give you the top 5. They had the Eagles number 5, the Lions number 4, the Chiefs number 3, the Ravens number 2, and the 49ers number 1. I don't know if I'm necessarily surprised that the 49ers are number 1. How big of a gap do you think this is? Do you look at the 49ers as the most complete roster still? And if it is the most complete roster again, and we all agree, and the 49ers don't win a Super Bowl again, like what the hell, man? So what do you think? First of all, do you think it's the most complete roster in the NFL still?
Man, it's up there, right? Like it's
definitely
like
up there. It's definitely top 5. Like I don't think there's any debating that.
I think it more so like it gets, the debate occurs when you start like looking at the depth wise, right? Like I think that's where it becomes concerning, because the Niners don't have depth in certain situations. Linebacker, offensive line. Like it's kind of hard to put the Niners at 1 because of their offensive line play, their linebacking situations, their linebacker 2, linebacker 3, injuries, guys that are coming back from injuries, safety. Are you going to have a rookie start at safety? How does Hufanga come back? But they have a lot of talent, right? I just don't know if when you look at a roster, do you look just at the starters, or do you look at the entire roster, entire 53 man, right? I think that's what I look at. And I think I've said it in the past. I don't think the Niners are the most complete team in the NFL because they lack depth in certain situations. I thought last year, and I said it last year, I said, you know what? The Niners defensive line lacks a lot of depth. They're going to struggle to get after the quarterback at times, and they're going to struggle to stop the run. Sure enough, they couldn't stop the run at times, and they couldn't get after the quarterback in certain situations. So they had to trade for an edge rusher to help Bosa out. So I think when you look at the roster, do they have the most depth everywhere? No. Do they have the best O-line or top 5, top 10 O-line? No. Linebacking situation, we can argue that they lost the Super Bowl because their linebacker 2 went down and they replaced him with a linebacker that's not as good, at least temporary. So I wouldn't say they're number 1, but I would say they're in that top 5 category because they have the depth. I think what keeps them there is all the all-pros and all the talent they have. Guys like Kittle, Fred Warner, Nick Bosa, Christian McCaffrey, Debo, Brandon Ayuk. Those are the guys that keep them in that category, but they don't got the most depth and they don't have the deepest roster in terms of NFL-wise. Like I think there's other teams that have deeper rosters.
Yeah. I also looked at the Chiefs being number 3 on this list and was like, I don't look at the Chiefs roster and say, oh my gosh, it's just overly crowded with talent. That's not the way I view the Chiefs. The Chiefs have the right players in the right position. They have a great coach and a great quarterback, and then they build around that, and they're effective. They may be the best team still, right? Obviously, they just won 2 Super Bowls, but as far as just stacked rosters on paper, I don't view the Chiefs that way. But Then the flip side is how much does the quarterback kind of compensate or overcome for a lack of certain players, right? So if you have an elite quarterback, a truly elite quarterback, I look at the Bills roster and say, hey, without Josh Allen, this is a bottom 10 roster in the league. With Josh Allen, it's probably top 15. You know what I mean? So
Mhm.
how much of it is the quarterback themselves kind of bringing up the rear of it? I again, the Ravens are another team. I look at the Ravens. They're certainly not as stacked as they were last year. Still a very good roster, but Lamar Jackson brings that up a little bit. The Eagles certainly are stacked, but I don't know if I trust Jalen Hurts. A team that I don't see on here is the Texans. I think they were in the top 10. They were like number 7, but I think that roster is loaded right now, and they do have a good quarterback as well. So I don't know. I think the 49ers, if you just go player for player and you take like top tier players, and you compare that with the rest of the league, you probably get further on the 49ers roster before you just completely run out of good players. But to your point, what is the actual depth behind that? What is the quarterback? What is the coach? All those things do matter when you're coming up with this. I can make an argument for the 49ers to be number 1. I don't know that they're far and away that team anymore. I think the Lions are close. I do think the Eagles roster is close. I look at a team like Seattle that I don't think was in the top 10, but if I go player for player across the board, like that's a talented team as well. So the talent gap is not like this wide margin, maybe the way that it was last year. Like I looked at the 49ers and Ravens last year and said, dude, those teams are loaded, and the rest of the league's
Right.
trying to play catch up. This year, I'm looking at the Texans have closed that gap. The Packers have closed that gap a little bit. The Lions have closed that gap. So there are teams that are starting to. The Rams have closed that gap. So I think there are teams that are starting to close the gap on the 49ers and the Ravens.
And I think for me, it's more so like because I know I believe it was Nick, was it Edholm, right? I could be wrong on the guy who had that list.
Mm.
So it all depends on who's putting the list together, right? What's the criteria? I believe it was Eric Edholm, not Nick. But it all depends on what the criteria is, right? Are we going solely starters only? If it's solely starters, the Niners are at number 1. I don't think there's a team that has more starters on their roster that are high level talent. As like many of the Niners, like we could name like 10 dudes on the Niners who are starters who are that dude, right? Trent Williams. We could argue Debo, Brandon Ayuk, George Kittle, Fred Warner, Nick Bosa, Charvarius Ward, Talanoa Hufanga. Some people could throw in Hargrave like in that situation. So it all depends. Like if it's pure starters, Niners are in that. They're probably number 1. But when you go depth wise and you go complete roster, and I think that's kind of like the complete team, I take it into the entire roster. And I don't think they're number 1. I think there's other teams who have just as much talent in terms of their entire depth, where if a player does go down, they could replace that player and they're not going to lose much like play. Like, for example, if Trent Williams or Fred Warner go down, the Niners are screwed. Like, to be honest, like they're going to take a massive drop on those players versus there's other teams where their offensive line, it's not that big of a drop off. So it's certain situations and stuff like that. So I would probably say starter wise, they're number 1. If we look at the entire team, I think they're top 3. I don't think they're no lower than 3.
Yeah, I mean, the Chiefs last year lost their best offensive lineman headed into the Super Bowl, and they still won. Because they had that depth. They had Allegretti behind him, which was a very good player. So, yeah, most certainly. All day, every day. Kim says exactly why Brock gets dissed nationally. He didn't win with a super stacked team. Yeah, I don't know, man. I mean,
I
I
don't
think,
think Brock gets dissed. I don't think he gets dissed nationally. I think he gets dissed on social media, not by the national media.
yeah, I mean, I just think it's all in how you view it. I think that there are certainly people that are way too high on Brock. I think there are people that are way too low on Brock. The truth usually lies somewhere in the middle, right? So you have a ranking come out where Brock's at number 2. That's laughable. You have a ranking come out where Brock's at 16. That's laughable. You know what I mean? So it's like the truth lies somewhere in the middle. Today, you got a ranking come out where he was at 13. I personally put him at 10, but I would hear an argument to where he's around 13, depending on what players you like better. So I just think that there's this rush by the fan base to crown him and make him something that he hasn't, frankly, he just hasn't earned yet. And then there's also people that are outside of this fan base that hate the 49ers, that look at his stature, maybe watch a nationally televised game on Christmas and how bad it looked versus the Ravens, and then they form their whole opinion off that. You know what I mean? So
Mhm.
it just really depends on where you're coming from at it. I think there are people outside that will look at the 49er fans and be like, you guys are crazy. This guy is nowhere near what you think he is. And then there are 49er fans that are going to look at him and be like, you're crazy. He's much better than what you think he is. So it just all depends on your perspective. It really is.
And I think that's absolutely how you like. There's always going to be, for example, when quarterbacks are talked about, right? Josh Allen.
Mm.
A lot of people have him in that top three. A lot of people don't have him in the top five, like because they say, "Oh, he turns the ball over too much." X, Y, Z can't win in the playoffs. So you're always going to have that with quarterbacks, and I think that's where the conversation is truly great, and you could have those conversations because you're not going to have a player unless it's Patrick Mahomes who truly is an elite quarterback, and everyone's going to agree he's the best quarterback in the league. Like there's only a few of those quarterbacks that come across the entire NFL. But I know was that the last topic we had today.
Yeah, that was it.
I wanted to talk to you. What were your thoughts on Brock Purdy and George? Since we're talking about Brock Purdy right now, Brock Purdy and George Kittle showing up to the Luke Combs concert, and Brock. I was hoping Brock would chug a beer on the stage, but instead he was kind of just being the caddy for George Kittle. What were your thoughts on that, man?
I actually thought it was pretty funny. There was a moment like right before he started tossing him beers where he pats George on the back. And the way that I looked at it was like Brock is so much younger, but he's like so mature at the same time. He's like, all right, bud, I'm going to unleash you. I'm going to take the muzzle off you. I'm going to let you go crazy in front of all these fans and do your wrestling bit. Have fun, little guy. Like that's kind of the way that I took that pat. It was almost like it wasn't meant to be that, but it definitely came across as like this condescending, like, dude, all right, just be an idiot for a minute. Go ahead. So I found that pretty funny. I actually, there's little things that do matter. I don't care what Brock does in his spare time, but I actually kind of dig that he wasn't just chugging beers on stage. That's something your tight end should do, not the face of the franchise. So I get what from an optics standpoint why he probably wouldn't do that, and I think that was the right decision. But yeah, I just found the whole thing kind of funny.
I thought it was hilarious because I took that same perspective from that where he was like, "Get him, boy, go get him, boy."
Yeah,
Just like
go
yo,
ahead, man.
go do your thing, bro. And I thought it was cool because like not only does it show because I know on Grant's show he had talked about how Brock wasn't hanging out with those guys yet, that tier of players yet, right? Like he hadn't earned that right from them, or he was like hanging out with I believe he said Colton McKivitz and like you know understanding his spot on the team last year and
Mhm.
seeing him with George Kittle out at a concert like that, and having George Kittle chug those beers on stage and getting the 49ers fan base rallied up. I thought that was pretty cool to see, but I also agree with you. That is definitely the maturity of Brock Purdy as a leader on the roster and a quarterback in the NFL, understanding if I chug this beer on stage, the national media is going to be talking about me as he's not a franchise quarterback. Same thing like with the backward, was it Coward who talks about if you wear a backwards hat as a
Backwards
quarterback,
hat,
you're not
yeah.
a franchise. Like
Mhm.
I like that Brock didn't chug a beer. I wanted him to because I think it's. I mean, he's having fun on his off day. Who cares?
I
Um,
personally wouldn't care. You personally wouldn't care, but you know what the optics would be from that, right?
Absolutely. And it was just funny. It's like I just love how he does the stone cold with the two Bud Lights and
Yeah.
like nothing gets in your mouth. I love
Yeah,
it.
yeah,
That's
yeah.
awesome. But George Kittle should probably upgrade from Bud Light, man.
It's such a terrible beer. All those like Coors Light, all of them, they're all terrible. All day, every day, Kim says Brock looks shook on Christmas Day. Real MVPs don't look like that. He didn't win the MVP, and I don't think he deserved to win MVP last year. I really don't. So I agree. I mean, you can't look like that at any point, really. If you're an MVP, you can't be that much of a deer in the headlights. I think he finished third or fourth or something in the voting. I think that's about probably where he should have finished. But it was still a fantastic season. And then this is kind of what I'm talking about. You're kind of making my point for me a little bit all day, every day, Kim, where it's like you have some people that genuine, and I'm not saying this is you, but the comment is, hey, he looks shook on Christmas Day. Well, there's a lot of people nationally that don't watch all 49er games and they see Christmas Day. They sit down, they're unwinding, they turn on the TV, they're looking at the two best teams at that point in the NFL towards the end of the season. This is a great way to end our Christmas night. And here you go. You got Brock Purdy throwing 4 picks with everybody watching. Now all of a sudden there's this perception of him that he can't play a lick. And the only reason he's doing anything with this team is because the whole Jimmy Garoppolo effect. And I think that that's unfair too, you know? So like I said, the truth lies somewhere in the middle with Brock. He's certainly not this elite quarterback that a lot of 49er fans want to crown him as, but he's not some bum either. You know what I mean? So
I never asked you, how happy was your son on Christmas night after the Ravens handed it to the Niners? Like, he had to be rubbing it in at some point during that game. Like, did he get under your skin at some point?
no, he was respectful. He thought the 49ers would win that game. I think he was just happy that the 49ers didn't win and that his Ravens won. But no, he was good. I even in the Super Bowl, like, so I wasn't here for the AFC Championship because I was in Santa Clara watching the NFC Championship, and he was just so heartbroken when the Ravens lost. Man, I was talking to him, you know, at the end of every quarter and just trying to like keep him like, it's all right, bud. They're still in the game, and trying to keep him encouraged. But he was devastated, man. Like, he was crying and everything. He was very upset that the Ravens lost, but he was a good sport. And when the Super Bowl was on, he put on a 49ers hat and cheered for the 49ers
That's
as
cool.
if it was his team. You know what I mean? So
That's cool.
I thought that was pretty cool of him. But yeah, he was just extremely happy that the 49ers, that the Ravens won that game, and he got to sleep very well that Christmas evening. So yeah.
That's cool, man. So the first Super Bowl the Niners played, man, against the Chiefs. So my grandpa's a Chiefs fan. So when Montana got traded, he's a big Montana fan. He went with Montana to the Chiefs, stayed a Chiefs fan. And the first Super Bowl, he felt bad, right? Like, he was kind of like, it is what it is. Like, he's like, it is what it is. I wanted you guys to win, but I got my win. Well, the Niners were up during the second Super Bowl. So one of my uncles, like, he was kind of like rubbing it in on my grandpa, like, okay, like. And then when the Chiefs started like doing things, I've never seen my grandpa get animated like this. He was like, "Ow!" Like, getting like, I was like, "Ah, bro!" Like, that to me, I was like, "All right, he's under my skin." Like, oh man, like, I was like, "Damn it!" So like, it was just funny because like I never see him get like that. Like, he did like a little dance in front of everyone. I was like, "Yeah, rightfully so." I mean, my uncle started talking too soon, and sure enough, he got the last laugh. So I thought your son would have gave you a little nudge to get under your skin a little bit. But
nah, he was very respectful. He was just happy that they won. He's not quite at that age yet, right? Like, he turns 10 and coming up here in June. And so I think give it a couple more years, he definitely would probably talk a little bit of ish. But for now, he was just happy.
that's right.
And he was excited too, because he knew that he got to come back on the show and give his 2 cents a little bit. So he was excited for that. Dave says, thank you guys. Shout out to the chat. Let's have a fantastic Friday after this show. Let's go Niners. Trade Kyle. Yeah, everybody, I hope you have an awesome holiday weekend. Stay blessed. Stay safe, first and foremost, for you youngsters. Really, anybody. Don't be doing some stupid stuff like drinking and driving. Just enjoy yourself. Uber around. Enjoy your extra day. And take care of yourselves. Marco, as always, thank you so much for doing the show with me on Thursday. Absolutely love this thing that we got going on. We'll be back next Thursday. I should be back Monday with Coach. And until then, peace.